Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome back to today's program, Chris Jones, who's Executive Vice President, Industry and Services at Descartes. And today we're going to talk about high fuel prices and logistics, actions companies can take to mitigate the impact. So as if transportation and logistics executives didn't have enough on their plate, now they have to deal with, high fuel prices too. And as a recent CNBC article stated, quote, diesel prices are contributing to inflationary headwinds due to the fuel's vital role, in the American and global economy. Tankers, trains, trucks, all run on diesel, and the fuel is used all, across multiple industries, including farming, manufacturing, metals, and mining. So is this a short-term problem or is this a lingering one? Is this something that transportation professionals primarily have to deal with, or is this a problem that others across the organization have to pay attention to? And most importantly, what actions can companies take to mitigate the impact? Well, that's the focus of today's conversation, and it's great to have Chris back on the program to share his insights and advice on this topic. So Chris, welcome back.
Great, thanks for having me, Adrian. Maybe a couple things to think about here. When it comes to energy, it's always been cyclical. At some point, it's going to go down, right? It just invariably for a lot of factors. But I would say anybody thinking they're going to just wait this one out is probably going to be in a lot of pain. A couple things to consider here. Fuel or oil. Let's just start with base oil. Is a global market. The U.S. is not the dominant player. It is actually one of them, but as we've seen with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the sanctions that have gone on there, they were a major player, but at probably around 10%, not as big as maybe people would think. However, that has caused massive disruptions. And one of the things to think about is that oil, maybe this is a funny way to describe it, it flows quite freely all over the world. And if we take the U.S. as an example, the U.S. is a large importer and exporter. But in the case of, let's just say, Russian oil was showing up on the East Coast for quite a while and was used to help produce products like diesel, right? So when that got cut off, for anybody in the Northeast, Adrian and I happen to be in New England, you can see just $6 a gallon for diesel is there, right? It's not like those refineries can just flip to U.S. grades immediately, right? So that's part of the whole challenge here. The second thing is, hey, the economy is doing incredibly well, right? So when you really look at the things that are going on, and yes, we have inflation, but to be honest with you, when you really look at the jobs reports and everything else, there's just a lot of demand out there. So, and then I think the last point, as you bring up, is oil is used in so many different things. So you're really competing not just within, let's say, the transportation market, you're really competing with all kinds of other industries here. So any kind of shortage puts everybody on notice and everybody is scrambling accordingly. So I would say, the next couple of years, will they stay quite as high as they are? Maybe not. I think actually in this last week or so, we've seen a couple cents a gallon reduction, but let's just say we're just not going to see what we saw a year ago, not for a long time.
Yeah, and a lot of great points and factors, to consider there. Yeah, I mean, just before this episode, I was looking at it, and diesel prices here in the U.S. are up about 75% today compared to a year ago. So even if you start, a few cents here or there, it's going to take some time to drop, 75% to get back to where it was. So it's going to remain elevated, for some time. And that, like you said, it's not only just here in the U.S., but it's around the world, issue. So, obviously, I mean, I think it makes sense that, for transportation executives, this is something that gets factored into, what yet another ball that they have to juggle with regards to that. But is this something that's just impacting transportation professionals, or do other folks across the organization need to, navigate or work collaboratively with transportation and others to navigate through this?
Oh, definitely. You could say a lot of functional groups are drivers of fuel usage, right? Sales to me is a great example where or marketing strategies where you have certain customer service policies or salespeople that continually say, oh, we're going to get it to you tomorrow, whether they actually needed it or not. These are the kinds of things that are definitely out there that we need to have collaboration, and that is the key word, between the logistics organization, sales, marketing, procurement's another good example. Again, if you're doing things like managing all your own inbound, there's a number of places like that where you can make a difference. And then maybe one last point is, in that whole conversation and give and take, the CFO is your friend. All right. This may be not something a lot of logistics people or supply chain people think about, but if you're saying, okay, hey, if we did X from a service policy point of view, you need somebody to basically say, and this is what it's worth to us, right? And the ultimate scorekeeper, okay, is the finance team. So they're key in this conversation too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And certainly, I mean, I know it's top of mind. I mean, I think the pandemic in general elevated the role of supply chain logistics to the CFO and the CEO. And this is something that, they're keeping an eye on as well. And your point about collaboration is key too. I mean, I've talked to I was talking to a logistics executive not too long ago, and he was talking about how, in his industry, transportation is such a large component of the cost of goods sold. And, being able to collaborate with sales, right? Because, sometimes, transportation was included in the cost, or, what wasn't, it's free delivery,
Yep.
if you will.
Yep.
Or they had quoted something in the past on the one set of assumptions of what the transportation costs were going to be. But now with fuel being so much higher, and, in some cases, we had been seeing in the past with the, contract rates going up and so forth, this back and forth collaboration and communication in terms of sales being able to communicate to customers in terms of, hey, we need to increase our prices a little bit, or we need to add, a fuel surcharge, or whatever the case might be. Those types of conversations, it seems, are happening more and more because of these, the dynamics and the volatility that's happening in the transportation realm. Interestingly enough, though, back in May, we asked members of our Indigo supply chain research community, and these are all supply chain logistics executives from, manufacturing, retail, and distribution companies. We asked them if their organizations have made any changes to their transportation practices in response to high fuel prices. And almost 3/4 of the respondents said that they have either made only, quote, a few changes, or haven't made any changes, right? To their transportation practices. So again, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of activity or a lot of changes going on there. So first of all, do these results surprise you? And why do you think many companies have taken little or no action?
Well, I would say they are probably a little higher than I expected in terms of the level, I'll call it, of let's say, non-action than I would have hoped to see. But for a lot of folks, there's inertia involved with making changes, right? And so they really, like I said right up front, like, if you're thinking you're going to ride this out, right, I'll just take the hit and I'll keep doing things the way I have been doing them, and everything will eventually kind of go back to where it was supposed to be. With that is inevitable in this space, and it's, like I said, really unfortunate. And I think that there's a lot of things people can do that don't necessarily require investment. There's also a lot of things there, but I do think that there's a number of, I'll call it, kind of quicker hitting things that they could do and make a difference.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I mean, I think for some companies and some executives, they might think, well, like you said before, particularly with fuel, it seems like it's such a big problem. It's a global problem. You're talking refineries, you're talking the oil markets. They might think, what can we do? I mean, it's probably outside of our direct control, so we just have to kind of bite the bullet and deal with it. But as you just said, there are probably things that they can do. So let's start with, I mean, what are some low-hanging fruit actions that companies can take right now to start mitigating some of this impact?
Sure. So I think one of them is, look at your contracts with your customers. A lot of people have things built in that they haven't exercised. Do you have the ability to do a surcharge? So does that already exist? That to me is again, work with the legal organization, sales organization. You can quickly find out whether or not you have room to maneuver there, right? Another one is basically look at lowering your customer service levels, right? And we'll get to the whole notion of collaboration with customers in a second, but hey, looking at this and saying, is there an opportunity here for, I'm not going to do next day as an example, or I'm going to look at, I'll tell you when I'm going to make a delivery, or, hey, maybe we need to combine deliveries here, types of stuff. There's a number of things there that were, I think, if you look at those kinds of activities, there's, I'll call it ways to be able to, I'll call it minimize that impact. Another one is actually for those people that have transportation management or a route planning solution, is really look at how those things are configured. If you go back a couple of years ago, fuel was much cheaper. So you may have said, okay, I'm willing to take more miles because miles are cheaper than resources. Okay, well, at almost 2x the costs in the last year, that equation may not have changed. So you may want to look at actually optimizing to take more miles out, and maybe actually be okay with having, for instance, let's say more hours. And I won't go through all the details and how that all works, but that is just a great example of something simple. Driver performance is another one. Classic things: speeding, idling, off route. All these things are again things that it's driver behavior, right? We're really talking about that could be done there. Vehicle performance, this is another classic one. When do you need a tune-up and so forth? And both this one and the one I just talked about are really around telematics. If you have it, this is something you should get after. Challenging carrier fuel surcharges. Okay, they may be good, okay, but make them do the math, right? I'll just say it in this current situation, that there are some people who are making more money. They're not just passing on the cost. It's the classic, I'm going to add a little more. Who will know the difference, right? So that's a key one. And then the last one real quickly in this space is, I'll call it just really the focus on collaboration. Go to the customers and say, look, we're either going to have to raise our prices, or we're going to have to look at doing things differently. You'd be amazed how much people are trying to avoid those costs. They know these conversations are coming, right? So that's that. Same thing with the carrier community. How could they be smarter with what they're doing? Can they offer you new or different services? How do they work with other companies to create density, right? That kind of stuff. So I think those are all in the realm of, it's just putting some time and effort into it, and you can see some benefit.
Yeah, those are all great. And, I think that, to your point, that they're kind of low hanging fruit opportunities here. I mean, these are things that, I think, require just a little bit of, time and effort, if you will, but nothing that's going to, require thousands of dollars of investment or implementing, additional technology and things like that. I mean, there's a lot that can be done within the realm of what's already existing within contracts. And just like to your last point, having conversations, right, with carriers, with customers, to see how, you can together, navigate through this. So Chris, then as a way to wrap up, if fuel, if elevated fuel prices are going to, here to stay into the foreseeable future, I mean, what else can companies do then? I mean, beyond kind of these low hanging fruit, which I think is the first step, and makes a lot of sense. And you could probably, achieve some significant benefits just from doing those things you just talked about. But what else can they do to navigate through this successfully, and perhaps even outperform the competition too?
Well, I would say that there's been so many advances in just transportation oriented technology. Let's just take things like network optimization, right? The tool's very sophisticated these days, much easier to use. I think actually the key thing though is with network optimization right now, is to focus on looking at the impact of different service policies, not brick and mortar changes. Brick and mortar changes don't happen quickly. You can look at things like customer stratification as an example, and come up with a view that says, hey, here's what the opportunity really exists. To me, those are things that can be done in a couple of months. If you already have the tools, you should be doing it, quite frankly, right? Another one that's probably, I'll call it in the weeks to months type of timeframes, is rebid carrier contracts, right? Focus on fuel cost reductions. And again, working with the carriers, right, on what could they do. This is another one. If you haven't implemented any form of optimization for transportation, whether it's again for common carrier or for fleet, there are a couple ways to do that. We already just talked about the whole network optimization piece of it. Strategic, we would call things like strategic route optimization is a good example. Your classic daily planning, okay? These are things that if you haven't done this or you haven't really put anything into what you have in a while, we're talking, I would say easily 15% reduction in mileage is very, very possible. And one of the newer areas is really more optimized execution. What's happening during the day, right? How do I get things back on track? How do I help drivers make decisions? Again, you can squeeze out some more. There are also some very, very sophisticated ways of doing things with what are called customer steering, which is the same thing as we mentioned with the Salesforce and Salesforce steering. Don't let them provide the choices. Tell them what needs to be done for both customers and sales. You'd be amazed how many customers will take the options that you give them. So why not give them options that help drive down, your miles or your carrier's fuel costs and so forth. Dynamic delivery pricing is another one, right? We mentioned before, look at changing, fuel surcharge, but you could actually even just take this, to your point, Adrian, for the future and say, look, every delivery is not the same, even for the same kind of service, right? So how do you know for a given delivery what you really should be charging? We're seeing companies do this, pretty decent margins and improvements, right? So I think that's a good one. Another one, and I'll just kind of keep it to this one just at the end. Sustainability is one of the biggest drivers and opportunities here for a fuel cost reduction. So many consumers and companies in general are looking at reducing their carbon footprint, carbon impact, right? Well, eco-friendly deliveries are, again, around things like grouping, driving delivery density, and consumers want to know this, right? There is a whole class of consumers. We've done a lot of research on this. I'll just say it's a significant percentage, and just stay tuned. We're actually going to have a report coming out on this whole subject. But they are willing to take options that will, in fact, and they are truly helping the environment, but by their nature, how they're helping is going to reduce fuel costs. So leveraging sustainability, not viewing it as yet another problem to deal with, is actually a huge opportunity here.
Well, a lot of great words of advice there. And, I think it's another reminder here that, if you're still managing your operations with, spreadsheets or whiteboards, or, you haven't really fine-tuned your existing technology, or using technology from, the 1990s and aren't leveraging some of the more powerful, optimization and execution capabilities, you're definitely, leaving money on the table. You're impacting customer service, and you're kind of handicapping yourself to succeed, moving forward. You wrote a great guest commentary on Talking Logistics today, which touched upon some of the things you just talked about now. So I invite our viewers to check out Enabling More Profitable Home Delivery, which we published today on Talking Logistics. So you can search for it there. But Chris, as always, you provide some great, insights and words of advice around this topic. So thank you for making the time to be with us today.
Well, great. Thanks, Adrian. And I hope for everybody that's watching this, they can find one or two good ideas here to make a difference.
Great. Well, I want to thank those of you that joined us today. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Descartes website or on Talking Logistics, and you have a question or a comment for Chris, you can post it there, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.